a record collection of draft picks and outstanding rookie point guard Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari for Paul George.
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander has been named the 2024-25 MVP.
Picture this. It's July 5th, 2019. You wake up, grab your phone, and see the most shocking trade in NBA history flash across your screen. A trade so lopsided, so devastating, that 6 years later, we're still trying to figure out how it was legal. I'm talking about Paul George being traded to the Los Angeles Clippers, and by the end of this video, you'll understand why this might be the most catastrophic trade decision in the history of professional sports. But here's what's crazy. At the time, most people thought the Los Angeles Clippers won. ESPN analysts called it a masterpiece. Sports Illustrated said it was genius. Even Thunder fans were divided on whether they got enough back. They had no idea what was coming. See, this isn't just a story about one bad trade. This is about how a single decision created a butterfly effect that's still destroying one franchise while building a dynasty for another. We're talking about a trade that gave one team 38 draft picks, a trade that turned a 20-year-old bench player into the 2025 NBA MVP, a trade that started a chain reaction of deals that left one of the most expensive rosters in NBA history with zero, and I mean zero, first-round draft picks until 2030. But wait, it gets way worse. The player they traded everything for, he just finished the worst season of his career on a different team, averaging career lows while his new squad won 24 games. The picks they gave away, they're about to turn into lottery gold for their rivals. And the young player they included as a throw-in, he just became the most valuable player in the NBA, while the franchise that traded him away is stuck in basketball purgatory. I've spent weeks researching this trade, comparing it to every infamous deal in NBA history, and what I found out will absolutely blow your mind. Today, we're gonna break down exactly how the OKC Thunder pulled off the heist of the century, and why the Los Angeles Clippers' future is way darker than you think, and whether this really is the worst trade in the history of professional sports. Trust me, by the time we reach the conclusion of this video, you're going to question everything you thought you knew about NBA trades. You might even think Nico Harrison's a genius. Okay, maybe not that far, but that shocking detail I mentioned about 38 draft picks, well, that's just the beginning. So before we get to the content, make sure you drop, like, subscribe, and turn on our notifications to get the latest NBA news to your device. And if you want bonus content, check us out on Instagram and TikTok. And now that we got all that out of the way, cue the intro. It's my favorite time of the year because the WNBA season's officially here, and these are easily the best lines to make some easy money on Prize Picks. And we've been on a crazy win streak since the WNBA season began, and we're going to be carrying this throughout the summer. Use my promo code microphone to get a free $50 when you deposit $5 or more, and follow my Instagram at TheFlightMike to get my picks. And thank you, Prize Picks, for the sponsor. Mic check 1 2 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Let's take you back to the summer of 2019, one of the most exciting and anticipated free agent classes we've seen since the summer of 2010 before it. Kawhi Leonard, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Jimmy Butler were all available in NBA free agency. The Toronto Raptors had just won their first championship with Kawhi Leonard leading the charge. Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving inevitably decided to team up on the Brooklyn Nets. Anthony Davis finally got his wish to join LeBron James on the Lakers, but nobody, and I mean nobody, saw what was coming next. What happened on July 5th would change the trajectory of two NBA franchises forever and create what might be the most lopsided trade in basketball history. On that fateful morning, NBA fans woke up to explosive news that sent shockwaves through the league. Paul George was headed to the Los Angeles Clippers in a massive trade with the Oklahoma City Thunder. What made this especially shocking was that Paul George had just signed a 4-year, $137 million contract with OKC the previous summer, famously standing on a stage with Russell Westbrook and saying,
"If y'all didn't quite get it, Let me say it again, I'm here to stay.
But here's where the story gets really interesting. And trust me, this detail will blow your mind when we get to the draft capital section later in the video. Behind the scenes, Kawhi Leonard was playing chess. He had been recruiting Paul George heavily. According to ESPN's Adrian Wojnarowski, Kawhi Leonard essentially told the Clippers that if you get Paul George, you get me. And with that kind of pressure, the Clippers went all in with an offer that the Thunder couldn't refuse. Little did they know, they were about to make a deal with the devil himself in Sam Presti. Now let me break down exactly what happened in this blockbuster deal, because when you see the numbers, you'll understand why NBA executives are still talking about this trade 5 years later. The Los Angeles Clippers received Paul George. That's it. And the Oklahoma City Thunder received Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Danilo Gallinari, 5 first-round picks in 2022, 2024, 2026, plus Miami's 2021 and 2023 picks, the right to swap first-round picks in 2023 and 2025. And when you add all those together, that's a total of 7 first-round picks / pick swaps. At the time, Thunder GM Sam Presti was widely praised for securing such a massive haul for a player who wanted out. But nobody, not even the smartest NBA analysts, could have predicted just how well this trade would age for Oklahoma City. Well, of course, except for Doc Rivers, who apparently saw all of this coming.
We're getting Kawhi and Paul George, was happy. Having said that, I did bring it up, and I did say, man, can we give them somebody else? Like, we cannot give up Shai. I even told Kawhi when he was saying, like, I need another guy. And Kawhi will verify. I kept saying, Kawhi, Shai's going to be a star. For how long? I said, I don't know how long, but he's going to be one. So I think we saw it.
Honestly, if you just track this history of trades, it's actually quite impressive, because the way Sam Presti acquired Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is one of the most legendary trade-ups I think we've ever seen in NBA history. Pretty much in 2008, Sam Presti used the 24th overall pick on Serge Ibaka, who was a huge steal at that pick in the NBA draft. I mean, Serge was so good that they decided to extend Serge Ibaka as opposed to extending James Harden, and traded James Harden to the Houston Rockets, something we'll discuss a little bit later in this video. But in 2016, Sam Presti would trade Serge Ibaka for Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis. 1 year later, he would trade Oladipo and Sabonis for Paul George, and at the time, Paul George was thought to be a rental because he was adamant about entering free agency the next year. But in 2018, he convinced Paul George to re-sign. He then trades Paul George to the Clippers for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and 7 first-round picks / pick swaps. One of those draft picks become Jalen Williams, and in 2025, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander becomes the MVP. But before we get to that, we need to talk about the immediate aftermath, because the Thunder weren't done making moves. And here's where the story takes another shocking turn that nobody saw coming. The Paul George trade immediately triggered another seismic move. With PG gone, Russell Westbrook, the face of the Thunder franchise, reportedly asked for a trade as well. Within days, Westbrook was shipped to Houston for Chris Paul, 2 first-round picks, and 2 pick swaps. And just like that, the Thunder went from having 2 superstars to being in full rebuild mode. Except this wasn't your typical teardown. This was perhaps the most asset-rich rebuild in NBA history. And that's before we get to the stuff that isn't available on the stat sheet. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was originally drafted for his length and defensive versatility. He wasn't necessarily known as a remarkable scoring guard coming out of college, as evidenced from this interview with Doc Rivers.
Early in the year, last year, Shai was one of our better defenders, and then I think he hit the rookie whatever. But then I thought in the second half of the year, the ladies started getting it back. He's so long. I think he can be a great defender. I don't know if Shai believes that yet, but I do.
But immediately after acquiring Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, the Thunder traded for one of the best mentors that they could have potentially gotten Shai. And this changed everything for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, as Shai has been on record stating how instrumental Chris Paul has been in his own development.
Like you said, not only like a big brother, mentor, but just like a friend. He's always there to lean on. He was the first guy in my life that I was like close with, that like achieved the things that I wanted to achieve. And I really leaned on him for like advice. Not only basketball advice, like business advice, taking care of your body advice, like handling a family. They don't live with you. Like there's so many things that you deal with as an NBA player, especially of his caliber, that go under the radar. His guidance with that has been great.
But it gets even crazier. The Thunder were on a quest for the most asset-rich rebuild in NBA history. And Sam Presti see, this guy was just getting started. He later flipped Chris Paul to Phoenix for even more draft capital. The veteran players they acquired in various deals, like Danilo Gallinari, Chris Paul, and later Al Horford, all contributed to keeping the team competitive while they developed young talent. Except for maybe Al Horford, they shut him down earlier in the season and then just looked for a trade suitor for him, which inevitably ended up being the Boston Celtics. But this wasn't just a rebuild, it was a masterclass in asset management. And remember that number I mentioned earlier about 38 draft picks? Believe me, we're getting there. And when we do, your jaw is going to hit the floor. But first, we need to talk about the throw-in player that the Thunder received, because his transformation is one of the most shocking parts of this story. When the trade went down, most people viewed the draft picks as the main return for the Thunder. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander was seen as a nice young player with potential, but few predicted what he would become. And by a few, I mean basically nobody. What happened next defies everything we thought we knew about player development. In his first season with OKC, Shai averaged 19 points, 5.9 rebounds, and 3.3 assists per game. Those are good numbers, but it's nothing that screamed future superstar. Fast forward to now, and SGA has blossomed into one of the NBA's elite players. His scoring has jumped to over 30 points per game. He's making all NBA teams, and he's established himself as one of the league's most unstoppable three-level scorers, and probably the most important part is he won the 2025 NBA's Most Valuable Player Award. Let that sink in for a moment. The player that the Clippers included as a throw-in to acquire Paul George is now the best player in the entire NBA. I mean, the Clippers have a history of doing this type of stuff. During the 2011 NBA trade deadline, they traded Baron Davis to the Cleveland Cavaliers alongside a first-round pick in return for Mo Williams, and that first-round pick became the #1 overall pick in the 2011 NBA draft that the Cavaliers used to select Kyrie Irving. And what's wild is that SGA's development trajectory resembles that of a young Paul George. Both are smooth, efficient scorers who can create their own shot and play elite defense. The difference? SGA received star status at a younger age than PG did, and now he's reached heights that Paul George never did and never will. JJ Redick even said on his podcast that I don't think anyone could have predicted that Shai would become this good this quickly. He might already be better than Paul George was when he was traded. Well, JJ, there's no might about it anymore. The reigning MVP is definitely better than the aging veteran who's struggling to stay healthy. I mean, the last I heard about Paul George was this.
And it's like, man, I hate to be harsh, man, but I gotta speak what's the real, how we feeling, man. You played damn near just as many games as you didn't play, bro. And it's getting to the point now where it's like, man, that shit, man. Rebuild all this shit, man. Because we don't even know if our best player gonna be available, man. We don't know what the we gonna get every night, man. The one thing about Giannis is you know you gonna get maximum effort every night, man. And we respect that.
SGA's combination of efficiency, scoring volume, playmaking, and now an MVP trophy makes this trade look even more catastrophic for the Clippers. They didn't just trade away a good young player, they traded away the literal best player in basketball. And remember that story I promised you about 38 draft picks? We're about to get there. And with SGA now being the MVP, it's even more insane than you think. What I'm about to tell you sounds like something out of a video game, not real life. Let's talk about these draft picks, because this is where things get absolutely insane. Thanks to the Paul George trade and subsequent deals, at one point the Thunder controlled 38 draft picks over a 7-year period. That's not a typo, 38 draft picks. I want you to think about for a second. Most teams are lucky to have 7 picks over 7 years. The Thunder had 38. Some of these picks have already turned into key players that haven't even scratched the surface of their potential. Players like Jalen Williams, Chet Holmgren, and others. The rest represent future possibilities that can sustain the Thunder's competitive window for the next decade. I mean, they don't even have Nikola Topic yet, and he was a player that a lot of teams were considering for the #1 overall pick in the 2024 NBA draft. But here's where it gets even more brutal for the Los Angeles Clippers. And trust me, when we get to their current situation later in this video, you'll see how dark their future really is. The unprotected Clippers picks in 2026 and the swap right in 2025 are coming right as Kawhi Leonard ages and potentially declines. signs. And Paul George is no longer even on the team after leaving for Philadelphia in 2024. We could be looking at lottery picks that the Thunder own outright from a Clippers team that's stuck in mediocrity. As NBA analyst Kevin O'Connor put it, Sam Presti has essentially created an infinite draft pick generator. Former Celtics executive and current ESPN analyst Mike Zarin called it the most impressive accumulation of draft capital in NBA history. But wait, we haven't even talked about what happened to the Clippers yet. And when you hear about their playoff failures and what happened to Paul George after he left LA, the story takes an even darker turn. From the Clippers' perspective, this trade was always about one thing: winning a championship with Kawhi Leonard and Paul George. The 2019-20 season started with massive expectations. The Clippers were championship favorites with two elite two-way wings leading the charge. But what happened next was one of the most spectacular failures in NBA playoff history. The bubble playoffs in 2020 ended in disaster, blowing a 3-1 lead to the Denver Nuggets in the second round. It was a collapse of historic proportions, with Paul George in particular struggling in crucial moments. His infamous playoff P nickname morphed into Pandemic P on social media after he shot 4 of 16 in Game 7. The next season saw another second round exit, though this time they did reach the Western Conference Finals in 2021 after Kawhi Leonard went down with an ACL injury that would keep him out the entire following season. But here's where this story takes the most shocking turn yet. You remember when I said this trade has a lot of twists? Buckle up, because for the Clippers, injuries were the story throughout the Paul George era. Kawhi and PG missed significant time in nearly every season they played together. When healthy, they were an elite duo, but availability was their biggest issue. The partnership officially ended in the summer of 2024, when Paul George opted out of his $48.7 million player option with the Clippers to sign a 4-year, $212 million contract with the Philadelphia 76ers. And after 5 seasons, the Clippers have nothing to show for Paul George's departure. No championship, no compensation, just an aging roster and a depleted future. And if you thought the story couldn't get worse for Paul George, his first season in Philadelphia was an unmitigated disaster. The 76ers finished with a brutal 24-58 record, missing the playoffs for the first time since 2017. George himself played in only 41 games due to multiple injuries, averaging just 16.2 points, 5.3 rebounds, and 4.3 assists per game, which was his lowest scoring average since his rookie season. The 35-year-old George's season was shut down in March due to adductor and knee injuries, and his struggles were so pronounced that his debut season was described as disappointing and disastrous. The very player that the Thunder traded away for unprecedented draft capital has essentially fallen off of a cliff, making the trade look even more lopsided. Former Clippers coach Doc Rivers later admitted that the price was steep, but you have to understand the pressure that we were under. If we don't make that trade, we don't get Kawhi. It was that simple. But hold on, because when you hear about the Clippers' current situation and what their future looks like, you'll realize that this story has one more shocking twist that makes everything even worse. To determine if this is truly the worst trade in NBA history, we need to look at some of the other contenders for that dubious title. And trust me, after you see the comparisons, the Paul George trade is going to look even more terrible. But first, let me set the stage. And let's start with another trade that occurred during the same summer. In the summer of 2019, the Los Angeles Lakers acquired Anthony Davis from the New Orleans Pelicans in a deal that had striking similarities to the Paul George trade. The Lakers would receive Anthony Davis, and the Pelicans received Lonzo Ball, Brandon Ingram, Josh Hart, 3 first-round picks, which included the 4th overall pick in 2019, and the right to swap picks in 2023, in addition to an unprotected 2024 first-round pick with the option to defer to 2025, which the Pelicans did. The key difference is the Lakers actually won a championship with their trade. In 2020, Anthony Davis and LeBron James led LA to their first title since 2010. And yes, it totally counts. I don't care what you guys say. The bubble championship was one of the hardest and most unique championships to win. It definitely counts. That championship banner makes all the difference when evaluating whether a trade was worth it. This makes the trade an immediate success, and the Lakers would remain competitive for a brief window of time until they made another horrific mistake that we're going to get to later in this video. But what makes this comparison so fascinating is how the draft picks turned out. The Pelicans used the 4th overall pick in a draft day trade with Atlanta, which landed the Hawks DeAndre Hunter. They got the 8th pick in return, which got them Jackson Hayes, and the 17th overall pick, which was Nickeil Alexander-Walker, and the 35th pick, which was Didi Louzada. None of these players are still with the Pelicans. The Pelicans also used another Lakers pick in 2022 to draft Dyson Daniels, who has shown promise but was ironically traded to Atlanta to acquire DeJounte Murray, who dealt with an injury-riddled season with the Pelicans this past year. While the Pelicans built around Zion Williamson and Brandon Ingram and made the playoffs twice, they've struggled to advance past the first round, and unlike the Thunder, who struck gold with SGA, the Pelicans haven't hit on any of their draft picks from the Davis trade. This shows how crucial it is to not just acquire picks, but to draft well with them. The Thunder's success with SGA makes their trade look even better in comparison. Another trade that's worth examining happened in 2017, when the Cleveland Cavaliers traded Kyrie Irving to the Boston Celtics for Isaiah Thomas, Jay Crowder, Ante Zizic, and Brooklyn's 2018 first-round pick. At first glance, this seemed like a reasonable deal. Thomas was coming off of an incredible 2016-17 season where he averaged 28.9 points and made the All-NBA second team. The Cavaliers got what looked like a comparable all-star guard plus valuable assets. But this trade quickly became a disaster for Cleveland. Thomas's hip injury, which the Celtics may have downplayed, was far worse than they originally thought. The injury nearly derailed the trade when Thomas failed his physical, with Cleveland having to demand an extra pick just to complete the deal. Thomas played only 15 games for Cleveland before getting traded again at the deadline, and his career essentially ended due to hip issues. Meanwhile, Kyrie flourished in Boston for 2 seasons before leaving in free agency. The Brooklyn pick, which was supposed to be the Cavs' consolation prize, ended up being the 8th overall pick, which they used to select Colin Sexton, a decent player but hardly the franchise-changing prospect Cleveland hoped for when they gave up a 25-year-old all-star. This trade perfectly illustrates how a deal can look reasonable on paper but turn into a complete catastrophe due to unforeseen circumstances. In this case, a career-altering injury that one team may not have fully disclosed. But here's the kicker. The Celtics were losers in this trade too. Despite giving up significant assets to acquire Kyrie Irving, he only played 2 seasons in Boston before leaving in free agency to join the Brooklyn Nets in the summer of 2019. The departure was particularly painful because Kyrie Irving literally promised Celtic fans that he would re-sign just months earlier.
Shared it with some of my teammates as well as the organization and everyone else in Boston. You guys will have me back. I plan on re-signing here next year.
So in the end, both of these teams lost this trade spectacularly. The Cavaliers got an injured player who played 15 games and a draft pick that turned into a solid but not spectacular player. The Celtics mortgaged their future for 2 years of a mercurial superstar who left them with nothing but bad memories and burned bridges. This is what makes it different than the Paul George trade. At least both teams in the Irving Thomas deal had logical reasons for making the move and got something in return, even if it didn't work out. The Thunder's fleecing of the Clippers was highway robbery from day one. This next trade is particularly painful for me to talk about, and it makes the Paul George trade look even more devastating by comparison. The Los Angeles Lakers acquired Russell Westbrook in 2021, and this shows you just how catastrophic some win-now moves can be. In this trade, the Lakers received Russell Westbrook and 2 second-round picks, and the Wizards received Kyle Kuzma, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Montrezl Harrell, and the 22nd overall pick in the 2021 NBA draft. The Lakers were desperate to give LeBron James another championship window and traded away the crucial role players that were responsible for them winning the 2020 NBA championship, and the fit was disastrous from day one. Westbrook's poor shooting and ball dominant style clashed terribly with LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and the result was the Lakers missed the playoffs entirely in the 2021-22 season, despite having 3 supposed superstars. It was one of the most disappointing seasons in franchise history. LeBron and Davis both dealt with injuries, but even when healthy, the team couldn't find chemistry. Westbrook was benched in crucial moments and faced constant criticism, and the Lakers fired head coach Frank Vogel after the season. They would struggle once again in the 2022-23 season and eventually traded Westbrook to Utah in a 3-team deal at the deadline, essentially admitting that the trade was a complete failure. They've since rebuilt their roster but lost valuable years of LeBron James's prime. And finally, we cannot make a video discussing poor trades unless if we mention the Los Angeles Lakers trading for Luka Doncic. In a stunning move, the Dallas Mavericks traded Luka Doncic to the Los Angeles Lakers for Anthony Davis in a 3-team deal facilitated by the Utah Jazz. This was the first time in NBA history that 2 reigning All-NBA team players were traded for each other in the middle of the season. Now, this trade is fascinating for a comparison because it shows how even when teams make shocking moves with generational talents, the return usually makes makes some sense. The Mavericks got Anthony Davis, a proven championship level player and former finals MVP. While many criticized Dallas for trading their young superstar, at least they received another elite player in return, although they should have gotten significantly more draft picks in return. Now, how does this relate to the Paul George story? Well, reports indicate that the Mavs were concerned about Luka's conditioning issues and the looming commitment of another Supermax contract extension. In other words, they had legitimate organizational concerns and made a move accordingly. Now, it's really hard to grade this trade because it's still very early, but the Lakers immediately looked like contenders with Luka joining LeBron James. Although the Lakers roster around Luka and LeBron was extremely flawed with no front court depth at all whatsoever, they eventually would lose to the Minnesota Timberwolves in 5 games in the first round of the NBA playoffs. The Dallas Mavericks situation is very unique as well, because they lost Kyrie Irving to a torn ACL a few weeks after making this trade. Anthony Davis was never able to stay healthy until the latter part of the season, but they were able to luck into getting the first overall pick in the 2025 NBA draft, which gives them the ability to draft Cooper Flagg, which gives them a cheap, high-end, valuable player to plug into their starting lineup. And on paper, their starting 5 looks like a team that could make some noise in the West. But regardless, this team was eviscerated for not getting more draft capital in return for a transcendent all-star that is in MVP conversations year after year for averaging near 30-point triple-doubles. Let's go back 12 years ago when the Brooklyn Nets received Kevin Garnett, who was 37 years old, Paul Pierce, who was 35 years old, and Jason Terry, and traded the Celtics 3 first-round picks in 2014, 2016, and 2018, the right to swap their 2017 first-round pick, and 5 players that really didn't matter, including Chris Humphries and Gerald Wallace. Those Celtic picks eventually became Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, which was a core of a team that immediately made a deep run into the playoffs, made it to 2 NBA finals, and won an NBA championship in the 2024 season. The Brooklyn Nets won exactly 1 playoff series with KG and Paul Pierce before both were gone. Kevin Garnett and Pierce were clearly past their prime, and the aging stars couldn't carry Brooklyn to the championship that they envisioned. The Nets made the playoffs in 2014 and 2015, but never advanced past the first round after that initial series win. Within 2 years, both stars had retired or moved on, leaving Brooklyn with nothing to show for their massive investment. And the final trade I want to compare this to also involves the OKC Thunder, when the Thunder traded a young James Harden to Houston for Kevin Martin, Jeremy Lamb, 2 first-round picks, and a second-round pick. The Thunder definitely got swindled in this case. They got a minimal return from the package. Kevin Martin was a decent scorer for 1 season, but left in free agency. Jeremy Lamb was a role player who never reached his potential in OKC. The picks turned into Steven Adams, who is a very good player, and some other role players, but nothing that matched James Harden's impact. The Thunder would reach the Western Conference Finals in 2014 and 2016, but never got back to the NBA Finals. Many believe they would have won championships if they had kept James Harden alongside Kevin Durant and Russell Westbrook. The trade is often cited as a reason they never captured a title with their core. And for Houston, Harden immediately became an MVP caliber superstar, eventually winning the award in 2018 and becoming one of the league's most prolific scorers. He led the Rockets to multiple playoff runs and conference finals appearances. But just like the previous OKC Thunder core that he left, he was never able to win a championship. Now, where does the Paul George trade rank among these all-time fleecings? Well, we gotta consider a few factors, because when you see this breakdown, it's going to be crystal clear. 1, the immediate return. SGA has already become a superstar, something that took years to develop in trades like the Celtics Nets deal. 2 is the long-term potential. Unlike other bad trades where the draft picks were spread out over 3 to 4 years, the Thunder's picks from the Clippers extend much further into the future. 3 is the championship results. The Nets Celtics trade at least got Brooklyn to the second round. The Clippers have reached 1 conference finals but no NBA finals despite mortgaging their future. And 4, the ripple effects on the NBA. While you could make an argument that the James Harden trade had the greatest impact on the rest of the NBA, because had Harden stayed on the OKC Thunder, then chances are Kevin Durant would have never left to join the Golden State Warriors, orchestrating the most dominant team of all time. But the Paul George trade enabled the Thunder to rebuild without tanking. They've remained competitive while accumulating assets, and this is something that few rebuilding teams managed to pull off. Meanwhile, the Clippers' all-in mentality from this trade led to subsequent moves that have left them without first-round picks until 2030. But here's what makes this trade truly historic: the multiplier effect. And when you hear what the experts are saying about this deal, deal, you'll understand why this isn't particularly close about what's the worst trade in NBA history. Former ESPN analyst Zach Lowe put it this way: if the Clippers don't win a championship with this core and those future picks end up being in the lottery, this could go down as the most lopsided trade in modern NBA history. NBA analyst and former executive Amin El-Hassan was even more direct. The Thunder didn't just win this trade, they've committed grand larceny on a scale never before seen in the NBA. And remember, this was way before Paul George's disastrous season in Philadelphia and before we knew how good SGA would become. Before we declare this the worst trade ever, let's consider some factors in the Clippers' defense. One is the Kawhi factor. Without trading for PG, the Clippers don't get Kawhi Leonard, so they effectively acquired two superstars, not just one. At the same time, you can make an argument that they would have been better off just keeping SGA and developing him into a superstar. Two is the marketplace was very competitive. The Clippers weren't the only team pursuing Paul George. Reports indicated that multiple teams were making offers, which drove up the price. Three is their title window urgency. The Clippers had been stuck in mediocrity for years, and while things were looking up with their assortment of role players that made their first round series against the Golden State Warriors competitive in the 2019 playoffs, this was still a franchise with 0 conference finals appearances at that point, so taking a big swing made sense. And four, the Clippers were fighting for relevance in a Lakers town. The entire talk of Los Angeles was, when were the Lakers going to pair Anthony Davis with LeBron James? So landing two superstars instantly changed their profile in Los Angeles and helped build momentum for their new arena, even though Paul George left by the time the new arena was ready. Clippers owner Steve Ballmer defended the move in the 2020 interview, saying sometimes you have to take big risks to achieve great things. I'd make that trade again tomorrow if given the chance. Now, before we make our final judgment on this trade, we need to talk about just how devastating the long-term consequences are for the Clippers, and folks, it's not pretty. Let's start with the most shocking fact. The Clippers have given up the rights to 11 picks between now and 2030, while retaining just 3 picks of their own, with none of those selections coming within the next 5 drafts. Now, to be fair, this wasn't entirely due to the Paul George trade alone, but here's what's crazy. The Paul George trade started this avalanche. After mortgaging their future for PG, the Clippers kept doubling down, making additional trades for players like James Harden and others, each time giving up more picks and pick swaps. The Paul George deal set the tone for a win now at all costs mentality that led them to keep trading away their future. Read that again. The Clippers have 0 first-round picks until 2030. 0. They're completely cornered when it comes to using draft capital in trades, with virtually no leverage because very few teams want picks more than 5 years in the future. Which makes this even more funny because recently Lonzo Ball went viral for saying LaMelo Ball is gonna end up on the Clippers.
I low-key got Dylan Harper going to the Hornets, and I got Melo going to the Clips.
And my one question is how? How is LaMelo Ball gonna end up on the Clippers if they don't have anyone to trade for him? We have a completely separate video on that. I'll leave it in the end screen, but the Thunder meanwhile own the Clippers' unprotected 2026 first-round pick, which could be incredibly valuable. Even if the Clippers are decent next season, the Thunder will almost certainly be better, meaning LA gets a pick at the very end of the first round in any swap scenarios. But here's where it gets really bad. The Clippers are doubling down on this aging core, but now they're doing it without Paul George, who left for Philadelphia last summer. Despite another first-round playoff exit and losing their second star for nothing, team president Lawrence Frank announced that they're running it back with just Kawhi Leonard and James Harden as their cornerstone players. Let's talk about that core. The Clippers currently have the oldest roster in the NBA. Kawhi Leonard will be 34 next season and has played more than 60 games just once in the last 4 years. James Harden is 35 and just put up 7 points on 2 of 8 shooting in their Game 7 elimination loss to Denver. The math here is terrifying. The Clippers are banking their entire future on one aging superstar. Meanwhile, the Thunder not only have a 25-year-old superstar in SGA entering his prime, but they also own the Clippers' future picks as that franchise falls apart. It's like Oklahoma City is collecting interest on the best trade in NBA history, while the Clippers pay the bill with no championship window to show for it. So is this the worst trade in NBA history? Well, the honest answer is, it depends on what happens next. If the Clippers somehow win a championship in the next couple of years, the narrative does change. It becomes a steep price that was ultimately worth paying. If Kawhi and PG leave or decline sharply while the Thunder build a dynasty with the assets acquired, then yes, this goes down as the most lopsided trade ever. What makes this trade unique is that we're still watching it unfold. But I want to know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Is this truly the worst trade in NBA history? If you guys made made it to the end of the video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe, because this is one of our longest videos to date on a topic that I'm personally very passionate about. And if you want to consume more of our content, we have a video on a potential LaMelo Ball trade that's about to go down, but we've also uploaded a video on our baseball channel, Uni Diamond Talk, on Trevor Bauer. I'm gonna leave both of the links in the end screen. I'll meet you guys there. I'm your boy Mike, and I'm dropping our mic until our next upload.